Today, we are going to make some grass. No, I'm not in Colorado, so it's not going to be that kind of grass. It's our techniques that are so simple and sensible, your miners have practically built themselves.
Hello folks, it's Mad Dog Merv, and welcome to today's show. So that collection that I got not too long ago, I decided what I wanted to do was some of the tanks in there. Well, I really couldn't use them in my personal collection of Shermans, but I thought it would be kind of fun to at least repair them and clean them up. You know, they're supposed to run. They've got these gears in them and these electric motors, and well, what the heck, you know, just thought it'd be kind of fun to go through it, rebuild it, show you folks how we did that, and kind of show you how they turned out. And then I'm probably going to put them up on Marketplace and, you know, see if I can get a couple of bucks for them. So today we are going to look at the tanks from that collection, and we're going to get them repaired.
There were several tanks in this collection that were interesting, but the one dead center in the middle here, the Tamiya Jumbo, absolutely can't wait to get started on that, even though it's not motorized. But you see the two M4A3 E8s, and on the far left is an M10 tank destroyer. That one is also motorized, but we're not going to mess with that today. And then on the left side here, you've got the M36 that actually had the battery still in it. So let's get started on this and see what we can do. I cleaned up the Jumbo with just some soap and water and let it dry overnight. You can see it cleaned up pretty good, but it's going to need paint, and a few pieces have fallen off. I do have this barrel, the 76 millimeter barrel, that's going to go on it because I want this to be Cobra King, like when it was knocked out in the Task Force Balm mission. Now I went ahead and painted it, and we'll talk about how I painted it a little bit later. Went ahead and did my dry brushing and my Larry's bath water. We'll talk about all of that later, and you can see real quick and easy, poof, it turned into a really nice looking tank. Putting on the barrel, cleaning things up, getting it to this point, really I'm into it about 5 hours, so not too bad to get it to this point. Well, moving on to the next one, we have this M36, the old Tamiya kit from, I believe this one was the 1973, but this may have been the earlier version, but it has the gears in it, it has the electric motor in it, and pretty neat actually. I turned the switch on and the motor kind of worked. So, but look how filthy this thing is. So I got the body off. I'll show you how we do that whole body thing in a minute. And this was going to need some cleanup. It was going to need a lot of work to make it look right. And of course we got to take those figures out. They're just not going to cut it in today's world. So like I said, I put some fresh batteries in this. The motor kind of ran. I went ahead and put some of the Never Stall lube that I use on my train engines. I put some of this in this little motor, and it ran great. It ran great. I was so pleased with this. But there were a couple of little issues due to some age, and we'll talk about those in just a minute because it's the same issues that the next Sherman had. Well, maybe not the next Sherman, because this one is the 1970 Reeboks of a M4A3 E8, has the motor in it, but decided not to touch that one just yet. This is the one I really wanted. This was the Korea War version, 1970 Reeboks, had the motor in it, gears. Yes, I want to do this. Pardon my teal nails. This is one of those times my daughter felt she wanted to paint my nails, so forgive me. But here in the front, underneath, is this screw. You just loosen this screw up, and this is what tightens or loosens the track, but it also gives you access to take this whole thing apart. So I'm going to loosen this up to a certain point, and actually the front cover, just the transmission cover, comes right off, and you can see kind of how it looks underneath here, including the spider web, or the spider egg case. There you go. So we pull that off, and you have access to the gears and whatnot in there. So now I need to be very careful as I take this body off so that I don't break some of the little plastic parts. You see this little tab in the middle? Well, that goes into the slot, and if you aren't careful with how you lift this up, you'll break that off, and then you won't get the body to fit right again. So there is this cover for the batteries, and you have to pull that out, and this one pulled the old batteries out, put new batteries in, and the motor did not run, but I had faith that I could get it to run. So we're going to go back to this screw, and we're going to need to take it out completely, because it actually not only holds the front in place, it holds the gearbox, and you can see once that's out, the gearbox is right up against there. So if I'm going to take the gearbox out and do anything, I have to take this off. And as soon as I do, poof, it just lifts right up. You can see the gear that is on the main metal gear, and this little plastic gear here, well, it's got some grooves worn in it. So I'm going to take the motor off, and to do that, 2 simple screws in the back. You just take these right out, and the motor will come right out. Here's the problem. Yep, you can see that this is split. What am I going to do? Well, this isn't something you can just super glue and hope that it's going to work, because no, it's got some grooves in it here. So I tried to find it, see if they made a reproduction of it somewhere, and they really don't. But Tamiya does make these little scientific kits, and in one of those scientific kits, look here on the right hand side, a couple of gears that look like poof, dead on. So I went ahead and picked this up and got the motor back in. I used some of the Neverstall on the front and the back on the shaft here, down inside the contacts. Just lubed everything up good with the Neverstall. And you can see with the new gear in place, with brand new batteries in place, and I've got that cover back on it, and yeah, this is going to work. I know it's going to work. So let's start putting things back together, but this tank needs paint, which is great because I want to do that Korean War, that tiger, that jumping tiger kind of a paint scheme on it. I've been wanting to do that for a long time. I looked at my decals, and I do have some decals, but I thought, you know what, I am going to paint this by hand. So first off, we're going to mix some XF62, which is the olive drab I like to use for most of my Shermans. And I mix this with about 20% of the dark yellow, the XF60. It just depends on it depends on the look that I am going after, honestly. So I say 20%, but it may be less, it may be more. Sorry, folks. Thin it with a little bit of 99% isopropyl, and I came up with this kind of a lighter shade, but I like it, and it's going to turn out good, trust me. So I got it sprayed, and there's our base coat. I'm going to let that sit overnight. You can see the M10 in the background that I was working on as well. I just kind of worked on all of these at once, which was kind of a fun project. So I'm going to start by getting some Tamiya tape. I'm going to lay it down. I'm going to use a straight edge, and I'm going to cut strips, different size strips, maybe 1/8 inch, maybe a little bit thicker, and I'm going to use this for my masking. And here on the turret you can see where I have masked some of the areas, and you'll see how this is going to turn out in a minute when I get this particular area sprayed. I'm going to go with the yellow and not the red. I don't know, I like the yellow and black, or yellow and olive drab, better than I do the red and olive drab. So the hull, I'm going to use the same technique with the masking tape and kind of follow the decals that I've seen, and then we're going to spray it with yellow. And we used actually DNRG's Aspen Yellow, believe it or not, and then well, we took off the Aspen Yellow, believe it or not. It's one of the railroad colors, and went ahead and took the masking tape off. Now it's time to paint the tiger on there. So first off, I did the white, the fangs, and you can see kind of along the side of the mouth. Then I put the red for like the gum lines and the tongue, and finally then I filled in the middle with black. Then you can see I also put the beady little red eyes in there with the with the whites. I like how it turned out. I'm perfectly okay with it. Well, the next step was to take this pin wash that I call Larry's Bathwater. If you don't know what that is, check out in my very first season. There's a couple of different pieces on pin washes. One's called Larry's Bathwater. Anyway, put this all over. It gets down in. It gets down into cracks. Once it dries, it actually looks pretty good. So now we're going to move back to the Jackson for a little bit. I cleaned it up. I didn't need to paint anything. I thought it looked okay the way it was. I put this antenna on it though. Going to need that. Going to paint the wheels. I'm going to need to paint the tracks kind of a rusty color, a bit of a rusty color with steel on the edges. Probably not going to get to that anytime soon. But I do want to put some stowage on it. And I have these resin pieces that I have the molds for, and I go ahead and make several of these, paint them up as you can see. I do have to finish putting the straps on, and here's the piece that goes on the shelf on an M4 on the very back. And kind of an overall look at a bunch of the stowage that I have here. It's all resin pieces. So here's our Jumbo. What I decided to do with this Jumbo, you see the nice 76 gun on it. I put these resin stowage on the back just like I did on the December of 1944 version of Cobra King. I wanted to try and replicate Cobra King when it went on the Task Force Balm mission. The stars are dry transfers by Archer that I have. So I like the way that turned out. Well, we're going to throw some stowage here on the Jackson, as you can see. Weather it up just a little bit, paint the antenna. I'm starting to like how this Jackson's coming together. And here you go. I've taken some pigments. I have a technique, and it's in one of my very first videos about building Fury. So if you haven't checked that out, check out my Fury video. And I made this mud. I wiped it on certain areas to make it look like the crew had climbed up on the tank with their muddy feet. And there you go. I'm happy with how this turned out. Now let's watch it run. And finally, let's take an overall look here at our Korean War EZ-8. And you can see with the Larry's Bathwater wash, it's very subtle, but some of the areas you can see the black has gotten down into the cracks and whatnot. I should probably paint the spare tracks at the very back. Well, probably should paint all of them kind of a rusty-ish color. The ones forward, the yellow on them should just be fine. So this is how it turned out.